Welcome back. You're watching World News and I'm your host, Claudia Czerwinska. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán met with his Romanian counterpart Ilie Bolojan on Wednesday. The official shared an informal dinner in Bucharest. A new beginning. That's what Orbán called the meeting in a post on X. It was the first meeting between the current prime ministers of Hungary and Romania and could signal a thaw in relations between the two countries, which are now run by governments of opposite political orientations. The Hungarian prime minister is also expected to deliver a speech at the Tusványos gathering this Saturday. Held annually in Transylvania, which is now part of Romania but belonged to Hungary before World War I, the gathering focuses on dialogue between Hungarians and the country's diaspora. Ukraine suffered another round of deadly mass airstrikes by Russian forces overnight Wednesday. Civilian infrastructure in the port city of Odesa was particularly damaged in the latest barrage. Our correspondent in Kyiv, Oz Kataji, has more.
4 civilians have been killed and 28 others injured in Russian attacks across Ukraine over the last 24 hours following that third round of negotiations between Kyiv and Moscow in Istanbul on Wednesday night. Now, the Ukrainian authorities say Russia launched 103 drones and 4 missiles onto Ukrainian territory, with the southern city of Odesa being particularly targeted. Privos, the largest food market in Odesa, was hit and caught fire. That's a UNESCO-protected landmark, the largest food market in Odesa. Unclear what the full extent of the damage to UNESCO-protected sites there is in Odesa, but a lot of anger from the Ukrainian government this morning following those attacks, following those supposed negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Now, it wasn't just Odesa that was hit. Among the places targeted were Cherkasy, Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Sumy and Mykolaiv. Now, there was also a prisoner swap late on Wednesday night between Russia and Ukraine. That's the 9th round of prisoner swaps since those negotiations between Moscow and Kyiv began. No sign that there's any real progress towards any kind of ceasefire, though, following those talks. President Zelensky releasing a statement this morning following the attacks, saying Russia does not stop its terror, blocks diplomacy, and that is why it deserves full-scale sanctions responses and our strikes on its logistics, its military bases and its military production facilities. We will do everything to make diplomacy work, but it is Russia that must end this war it started. So very clear that from the Ukrainian side, at least, that Moscow is sending a message with attacks like this that it is not interested in diplomacy, it is not interested in a ceasefire, and it is not interested in peace with Kyiv. It's Oz Kataji reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
The Russian offensive in eastern Ukraine shows no signs of slowing down, with Pokrovsk being a key target. Russian forces are encircling the city and sabotage groups have begun penetrating Ukrainian lines and crossing into urban areas. According to military sources, Pokrovsk and its surrounding areas are under constant pressure. Unlike other fronts, where Russian forces have occasionally halted due to heavy losses, the assault near Pokrovsk remains aggressive and sustained. Ukrainian forces are repelling the attacks, with reports indicating a high number of Russian casualties. Moscow's forces, however, are steadily closing in on the city, which serves as an important logistical hub for many sectors of the front line in Donetsk, raising fears of its capture. The U.S. has approved 2 potential arms sales to Ukraine totaling over $300 million as President Donald Trump's approach to the war evolves. The new packages aim to bolster Ukraine's defensive capabilities amid intensifying Russian attacks. The deal includes the possible provision of medium-range surface-to-air missile systems to bolster Ukraine's air defenses, as well as infantry fighting vehicles to help Kyiv maintain combat readiness. The move comes as Donald Trump, once openly critical of military aid to Ukraine, recalibrates his approach to the war. As the conflict drags on, with Russia maintaining unrelenting drone and missile attacks and repeatedly rejecting Trump's ceasefire proposals, the U.S. president appears to have significantly shifted his position on both Ukraine and Putin. The European Union is calling on Ukraine to roll back its crackdown on the country's anti-corruption bureaus after Kyiv passed a new bill, effectively ending their independence. In response to the move, Ukrainians have taken to the streets in the largest protests since Russia's full-scale invasion began. In an exclusive interview with TVP World, Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski says Ukraine will not make it into the EU if it's a corrupt country. His statement was echoed by the EU Commissioner for Enlargement, Marta Kos. Here's more.
The fastest way for Ukraine to lose the support both of the EU and the member states and the publics in member states is to go back to the bad old days of corruption. As a corrupt country, Ukraine will not make it into the EU. We have to be convinced that the authorities from top to bottom are determined to stamp out corruption.
So as a neighbour of Ukraine, do you feel that the raids in this new bill are political overreach, or, as the authorities are saying, that there could be evidence to suggest there are Russian spies, Russian infiltration?
I'm sure there are all kinds of shenanigans. We sympathize with Ukraine's resistance against Russian aggression, so it is up to President Zelensky to fix this.
And Commissioner, I want to ask you the same question. Is this new bill political overreach, or have you seen evidence, have you seen suggestions that this claim, the suggestion that there's Russian infiltration could prove true?
I don't know about the rationale why these steps have been made. I can only interpret together with my team in Brussels what we got. And what we got is that actually the independence of the agencies is now being threatened or has been abolished. So, but you know, in my opinion, the institutions itself are not enough.
There were no survivors of the passenger plane crash in Russia's eastern region of Amur, according to the TASS news agency. 49 people were on board of the aircraft. The still-burning wreckage of the Angara Airlines AN-24 plane was found in the region of Amur on Thursday after it previously disappeared from flight radars. The flight dropped off radar while approaching its destination of Tinda, a town near the Russian-China border. Regional Governor Vasily Orlov said that according to preliminary data, there were 43 passengers, including 5 children and 6 crew members on board. Russian imperialism isn't limited to Ukraine, says Volodymyr Yarmolenko, editor-in-chief of UkraineWorld.org, commenting on the aftermath of the most recent round of peace talks in Istanbul. In an interview for TVP World, Yarmolenko highlighted that despite deadlines and threats of harsh sanctions, Russia's expansionist ambitions are deeply rooted in its imperial ideology.
We'll see what will happen in early September when the Trump's kind of deadline will expire of 50 days, but there were lots of other deadlines and nothing really has happened. And I think even if Americans decide to impose very harsh sanctions, which, as we know, there is a bill on them in the Congress, I don't think that Russia will try to find a compromise. Because in the Russian ideology right now, in the Putinist ideology, every compromise is a weakness, and Russians want to proceed to expand militarily, to get new territories. Why? It's another question. Why they need these territories, nobody knows. But I think it's in the psychology of the Russian imperialism today, and I think it doesn't limit to Ukraine only. We see lots of things around the Baltic states, or now around Azerbaijan or Kazakhstan, or around Europe, because Russia really wants to come back to the world order where it controlled the half of Europe as after the Second World War.
According to a new report by the Financial Times, the EU and the United States are closing in on a trade deal that would impose a 15% tariff on European imports. The deal is similar to the one signed between the US and Japan, which also calls for a 50% levy on Japanese imports. According to the report, both the US and the EU would waive tariffs on some products. These include aircraft, spirits, and medical devices. Despite the agreement being in the works, EU will continue to prepare a possible €93 billion package of retaliatory tariffs. These will be set up to 30% in case two parties don't agree on a deal by August 1st. The news comes after the European Commission said its primary focus was to achieve a negotiated outcome with the United States and avert the 30% tariff that Donald Trump has said he'll impose on the bloc. The new government of Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk will be sworn in later on Thursday. The event will take place in the presidential palace, as according to the Polish constitution, it is the president's prerogative to swear in the ministerial cabinets. Outgoing Polish President Andrzej Duda will receive the new government in the early afternoon. The government reshuffle sees, among others, Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski assuming the additional role of Deputy Prime Minister. One of the biggest changes concerns the Justice Ministry. Judge Waldemar Żurek will replace Adam Bodnar as Justice Minister. The reshuffle comes after the ruling Central Liberal coalition lost the presidential election in June to the conservative opposition candidate Karol Nawrocki. With just 2 years left until the next parliamentary election, Prime Minister Tusk is looking to regroup and regain momentum. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk will receive astronaut Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski today in Warsaw. The meeting comes just a week after he completed his mission on the International Space Station. The Polish astronaut was on board the ISS for 2 weeks, along with 3 other crew members of the Axiom 4 mission. And this very moment on your screens, ladies and gentlemen, you can see Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski with his wife, Polish MP Aleksandra Uznańska-Wiśniewska, joining in on a hug as he made his way to Warsaw Chopin Airport from Cologne, where he landed only but a few days ago, which we reported on here on TVP World. As you can see, he's all smiles. He had to fly to Cologne to undergo a series of medical tests after his return, after his trip to the International Space Station, where as part of the Polish Ignis research program and the AX4 mission, he conducted a flurry of experiments. And you can see that there's definitely an excitement to see our Polish astronaut back to Poland. This is the second Polish astronaut in history to ever reach space after General Mirosław Hermaszewski. This would be all the latest news for now. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska, and we hope to see you back here on TVP World for more news and features.